But first, let's talk more about two popular ways to gather informal feedback from your students. Now, one popular method is to simply ask your students in class for their specific thoughts on something. This can be an effective or ineffective method depending on how the question is asked and on the instructor's unique rapport with the class. And since the topic of rapport can be a bit nuanced in and of itself, we're going to focus this lesson on questions, specifically how to ask a direct question so that you get a response or get that feedback. So probably the most important takeaway about getting good feedback lies in how you phrase and pose your question. You want to avoid asking indirect or vague questions. Questions like, do you have any questions? Or is anyone completely lost? Or who didn't finish the reading? Or worst of all, who didn't get the right answer? Oh my. Because all that does is place a spotlight, an uncomfortable, horrible spotlight onto an uncomfortable and possibly embarrassing learning situation for that learner. And that's the last thing you want to do as a teacher. So what do we do instead? Well, we flip these questions around. Instead of asking, do you have any questions? You ask, does anyone have any thoughts or stories? You will be amazed at how that subtle change of wording will make such a huge difference. You will go from crickets to a flood of hands. Other ways to flip these questions around to make them more specific. Instead of asking, is anyone completely lost? You could say, smile and nod if you follow me. That is asking your students to be a bit more expressive with their faces. You know, after a long, full day of class or right before lunch, I get it. It's hard. We've all been there. That blank stare just kind of hangs on everyone's face. It's tough. It's natural. It's blood sugar. I understand. As the instructor, you might just have to work a little bit harder at certain times of the day and request verbally and directly for those kinds of informal feedback from students. If you have a class with homework or a business situation that involves prior work ahead of the meeting, instead of asking, who didn't finish the reading, a more tactful approach could be, who could use 5 more minutes to review the reading? If you teach something like a coding class, that tough stuff often just doesn't work right there. It's easy to forget a parenthesis or a bracket or a semicolon or something, but no one likes to admit it. So asking, who didn't get this to work right? That's not cool. But saying, thumbs up if you got the code to execute, that's better. To those students in class, that just means that those particular people are faster at typing. It doesn't mean that the people who didn't raise their hands are stupid, which is how they might feel if you put them on the spot. But you get the idea. The goal here is to turn a negative question around into a positive question or statement so that you are not singling out failure. Or these questions, turning them around, is to encourage more dialogue. That's the point of this. Another way to gain more informal feedback from your students is to solicit post-lesson feedback. This kind of feedback is usually done at the end of the day, just before students exit the class. Now, this type of feedback is most beneficial in multi-day classes, but it can also be used in single-day classes too, just before a longer break, such as a lunch break. Now, one way to solicit post-lesson feedback is to just have an open suggestion box. Now, this one is a very non-pressure optional thing that can be done either virtually or to just have sitting there physically in the environment. However, you are less likely to gain feedback this way, mainly because it is so very optional, and students won't really feel compelled to give feedback unless something is very wrong. This tends to skew results quite a bit. Now, my personal favorite idea comes from MIT, the mud card. Basically, at the end of class, the instructor hands out a simple index card to everyone and asks students to write down the muddiest part of today's lesson and one part of the lesson they found helpful or not helpful. Then students can't leave until they hand in those cards. Now, this feedback is then used to help clarify those sticky points of the lecture as review the next time the class meets. So yeah, the students learn the material better and the instructor gains insights into how to better frame the material, or at minimum, what material was difficult for the class as a whole, or to just a few select individuals to track potential trends. If you would like to learn more about mud cards, check out the URL listed on screen or just Google or Bing the phrase MIT mud cards. But yeah, mud cards, it's a fantastic idea, one that I just kind of love.